I have Warren's baby in my belly. 3 months before the wedding, my sister Zoe, who was being held by my fiancé, makes a terrifying confession. I look up at the sky, feeling a sense of inevitability. After all, my sister Zoe is a homewrecker who always wants what others have and doesn't hesitate to take it. In my family, it's been decided that Zoe and Warren would get married, and I have no choice but to accept it. My entire family is so crazy, it's driving me insane. I am Valerie. I'm a 30-year-old jogging enthusiast and a sports instructor. I've loved exercising since I was a child, and I feel that my current job, teaching what I love, is my calling. Before work or on my days off, I always jog along the levee, so my skin is tanned year-round. I prioritize comfort over fashion, tying my hair in a ponytail and wearing only a ring on my left finger. The ring was given to me by my fiancé Warren when he proposed last month. Warren, who is the same age as me, was a high school classmate, and we reconnected after becoming adults. His parents run a well-known local company, and Warren is their successor. People around me envy that I'm marrying into money, but for an ordinary person like me, it's just pressure. However, when I first met his parents at a family meeting, they were very kind and genuinely happy that I would become Warren's wife. I was relieved to have such good people as relatives. Now, we were going to have a family meeting at my parents' house. Valerie, your fiancé will be coming, and Zoe will be joining us too.
What?
The day before the family meeting, while helping my mom clean the house, she drops this bombshell.
Wasn't Zoe supposed to be at work?
She took the day off because she wanted to meet your fiancé. She really loves you, Valerie.
Ha ha ha.
I could only manage a strained smile at my mom's clueless words. Zoe is 3 years younger than me. She is the person I find the most difficult to deal with in this world. Unlike me, Zoe is stylish and charming. But her personality is the problem. Zoe has always wanted what others have since she was a child. I, being the closest target, bore the brunt of this. Since she was about 3, Zoe has always wanted my things. Whenever I got new clothes or toys, she'd cry, saying she wanted them too. My parents would say, "You're the big sister, so you should let Zoe have it." And they would give my things to her. I would get secondhand or just suitable replacements. Even the pencil case and study desk I got for school were taken by her, who had just started kindergarten. The backpack didn't become hers because I was told there would be cuter ones in 3 years, but she was given a cute kids brand bag instead. She seems to enjoy the chase. Once she gets what she wants, she loses interest quickly. My parents, looking troubled, would say, "We just bought that." But they never scolded her. I did my homework at the table, turning my back on the unused study desk. Her habit of taking what she wanted extended to kindergarten and school. Even when called in for trouble, my parents always took her side. Eventually, she started taking boys from other girls. By the time she was in middle school, she was known among the girls as a homewrecker. Some girls confronted her, but many boys sided with her, and most girls gave up. Even as her sister, I can see that Zoe is a kind of genius. She is a master at creating villains and timing her tears perfectly. She used her tears to manipulate our parents and boys, getting everything she wanted in life. I went to a university far away, too far to commute from home. It was all to get away from my devilish sister, Zoe. I got a job at a national sports gym in the state where my university was located. It was at this gym that I ran into Warren, my high school classmate. We felt it was fate to meet again in such a place. Warren was studying at a different company from his family's business, planning to return home and take over when he turned 30. Honestly, I didn't want to go back to my hometown with Zoe there, and the idea of becoming the company president's wife was daunting. So, when Warren proposed, I hesitated a lot but eventually decided to be with him. If I'm 30, Zoe is 27. She's an adult now, so she should have outgrown her childish desire to take what others have. I believed that and decided to return to my hometown when I got married. Even so, I couldn't shake the anxiety about having Zoe and Warren meet. And then, on the day of the family meeting,
Valerie. Zoe.
Zoe, with her long, beautiful black hair and white dress flowing, hugged me tightly. I hadn't seen her much since I graduated from high school, and I was taken aback by her unchanged, girlish charm and sweet scent. "Oh, Valerie. If you had a boyfriend, you should have introduced him to me sooner." "Sorry." "Valerie's boyfriend, nice to meet you, I'm her sister Zoe."
Oh, I'm Warren. I'm so happy to have a big brother for the first time. Nice to meet you, Warren.
I heard Warren swallow nervously as Zoe smiled softly. It was stupid of me to introduce them. Zoe's personality hadn't changed at all. I had a bad feeling about this. And that bad feeling came true immediately.
Sorry, Valerie. I'm pregnant with Warren's baby.
1 year after the proposal, and just 3 months before the wedding, Zoe made this horrifying confession. Of course, I was surprised, but not shocked. Of course not. Zoe wouldn't let a guy like Warren, the heir to a well-known local company and quite good-looking, slip through her fingers. It was all my fault. As I was crushed by despair, Zoe looked at me with her big, moist eyes.
Sorry, Valerie. I know Warren is your fiancé, but I couldn't stop my feelings for him.
Sigh.
Wait. You aren't at fault. The one who sinned is me for falling in love with you.
Warren. As the two gazed at each other dreamily, all I could do was sigh. I was more composed than I expected, but Warren found it strange.
What's wrong? Are you so shocked you can't speak?
Yeah, something like that. But the shock I felt was more about my foolishness in trusting Zoe than losing Warren. My attitude seemed to annoy Warren, who frowned openly.
You're really not cute, even at times like this. A normal person would cling and beg, "Don't leave me."
What?
That's why I hated the idea of marrying you. I only proposed because I thought I had to take responsibility after dating you until we were 30.
What? No, who was the one who proposed to me with tears in his eyes at that beautiful park? Who was the one who desperately convinced me when I hesitated to return to my hometown? Warren is too responsible. You should care more about your own feelings. Zoe gently touched his arm. Warren, satisfied, took Zoe's hand.
See, Zoe understands my feelings. Compared to you.
What? Sure, I may not be as charming as Zoe, but I never neglected Warren. And you, Warren, said you liked our straightforward relationship. This is all her fault. While whispering sweet words, she must have turned my memories with Warren into something negative. Even as my sister, she's terrifying.
She also had a hard time being stalked by a guy. Yes, if it weren't for Warren,
Yes, the usual story of Zoe making her ex-boyfriends out to be villains. Even after more than 10 years, Zoe's tactics hadn't changed. Oh, I can't. I don't have the charm or strength to win him back now. The two of them left the room together, as if to show off to me. They must have gone to report to my parents. When they heard Zoe was pregnant, they were surprised but quickly accepted my broken engagement and their marriage. In the end, Zoe was more precious to them than I was. It's your fault for not being able to satisfy him, Valerie. Zoe and the baby are pitiful, so let them have him. My parents' words, which seemed to blame me rather than comfort me, made my heart grow cold. Behind them, she smiled triumphantly, which finally made me angry.
What about the wedding? We've already sent out the invitations and there will be cancellation fees.
Don't worry, I'll take your place as the bride, Valerie. What? What is this girl talking about?
Because there's no better venue around here than the one you chose, and since I'm 3 months pregnant, it's perfect timing. We need to save extra money for the baby, right?
What is this girl really saying?
Zoe, you're such a good person.
What is this man talking about?
As expected of Zoe. We don't have to resend the invitations to the relatives. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Oh, Valerie, make sure to notify your friends and workplace about the cancellation. We're inviting Zoe's friends instead.
What is this mom talking about? There are only unreasonable people here. They were already moving forward with Zoe and Warren's wedding, completely ignoring my feelings. Everyone is so crazy, it's driving me insane. Valerie, I'm sorry. I'm going to be happy first. Zoe tilted her head with tearful eyes, making me feel nauseous. I felt bitter and miserable, but I had no allies, and Zoe already had a life growing inside her. I had no choice but to accept their marriage. Still, I didn't wish them happiness. Just because we're family doesn't mean I'll forgive them. They were the ones who discarded me first. After that, I informed my friends and workplace about the broken engagement as Mom instructed. Everyone was shocked and concerned that the wedding was called off just before it was supposed to happen, but when they heard it was because of Zoe and my ex-fiancé's shotgun marriage, they were appalled. They were speechless when they found out the bride was being replaced. My boss at work quickly canceled my transfer back to my hometown and promised to assign me to a nearby branch of the gym. My friends were furious on my behalf and suggested we go on a trip once things settled down. I might not have been blessed with a good family or fiancé, but I was fortunate to have supportive people around me. I took care of informing other important parties about the broken engagement and completed all my necessary tasks. Then, the wedding day arrived. Of course, I wasn't allowed to attend, not that I wanted to anyway. I spent the day loading the belongings I had already moved into what was supposed to be our new apartment onto my friend's truck. Apparently, Warren and Zoe were going to live there starting tomorrow. Although I had been able to return to my previous state, I had already notified my old apartment of my move-out date, so I struggled to find a new place. I was relieved to find that I could move today when my smartphone rang. As soon as I answered, I heard Mom yelling,
Valerie! Get to the venue now!
What?
But I was told not to attend. Just come!
With Mom's overwhelming pressure, I reluctantly agreed. I had expected to be called anyway. Glancing at the clock, it was just before 3 p.m. It was probably the time between the ceremony and the reception. I put on the formal dress I had prepared just in case and headed to the venue in my friend's truck. When I entered the reception hall, guided by the staff, I saw that the number of attendees was less than half of the 80-person capacity. Most of the bride's side were relatives, while the groom's side had only the groom's parents and a few friends. There was only one woman sitting on the bride's side. Moreover, that woman was wearing a pure white dress reminiscent of a bride's and drinking red wine. Warren's face was pale, and Zoe next to him looked extremely unhappy. When Mom saw me, she strode over with big steps.
Valerie! Explain to everyone.
What?
Explain what? Explain that this wedding is amicable. Our relatives are suspicious, and none of the groom's relatives are here.
I could only think that it was obvious. I didn't know how they explained the bride change from sister to sister, but with the groom's name being the same, anyone would be suspicious. This will ruin Zoe's wedding. Please do something. Pushed by the panicked mom, I was dragged to stand next to Warren. I reluctantly took the microphone from the bewildered staff and began to speak. Warren, Zoe, congratulations on your wedding. As the bride's sister, I wish you both happiness. Valerie. Warren's eyes moistened, and Zoe smiled contentedly. What do these people think of me? As if a sister who had her fiancé stolen by her sister would bless them.
What?
Ignoring the dumbfounded bride and groom, I faced the attendees.
As you can imagine, my fiancé Warren fell in love with my sister Zoe and got her pregnant. The bride and groom, as well as my parents, insulted me, saying I lacked feminine charm and unilaterally broke off the engagement. They told me not to attend the wedding, but as soon as they realized it was inconvenient for them, here we are. Mom wants me to explain that this wedding is amicable, but how can it be when Zoe stole my fiancé?
Valerie. Mom glared at me with a red face. Warren was sweating coldly, and Zoe looked at me with a blank expression. Then, applause came from one of the tables. It was the woman in a white dress who had attended as a friend of the bride. She stood up and walked over to me, her high heels clicking. The strong smell of alcohol made me wrinkle my nose.
Valerie, can I make a speech too? Go ahead.
Having no particular reason to refuse, I handed her the microphone, and she smiled brightly and began to speak.
I'm Adele, Zoe's friend. Sorry for being so drunk. Zoe, congratulations on your wedding. By the way, the groom is, Zach, right? What?
Warren was surprised to be called by an unfamiliar name.
Oh, no? Sorry, Zach was my college ex-boyfriend. Zoe took him from me. If it's not Zach, then Alan? Baden? Marcus? Hank? Edwin? Newton? What?
With each name Adele mentioned, not only Warren but the entire venue began to stir. Adele, unfazed, turned to Zoe.
Remember? These are all the men you took from others. There were more, but I can't remember them all. There were about 30, after all.
The murmurs in the venue grew louder. I was shocked at the sheer number, but given her nature, it made sense. Zoe glared at Adele for a moment, but quickly switched to her signature tearful expression. Valerie and Adele are being so cruel. I'm not that kind of girl. Right, Warren?
Oh, yeah. The reason I chose Zoe over Valerie is because Valerie was horrible to me.
So you're admitting in front of everyone that you left me for Zoe?
Oh.
Warren's face showed he realized his mistake. Zoe also froze, but quickly tried to turn Adele and me into the villains, as she had done with so many others. It's true Warren was engaged to Valerie. But Valerie was cold to him, so I just comforted him. Adele snorted in amusement. Sure. Making the ex-boyfriends and their girlfriends the villains to snag the guy is your usual tactic.
I've never done anything so terrible.
Then why am I the only one sitting in the bride's friends section?
Teach that.
And is the baby in your belly really Warren's?
What?
You were dating Alan until 5 months ago, weren't you?
What?
Warren looked at Zoe in shock. Adele, with surprisingly steady steps for someone drunk, left the venue and returned with a young man.
Zoe!
You. Zoe's face finally changed when she saw the sad-looking young man.
Why, you're that stalker who imagined he was dating Zoe.
Warren stood up, eyes glaring, but Adele snorted again. Oh, so that's the story. No, this man is Zoe's boyfriend, and my friend's ex Zoe took him just like she took you from Valerie.
What?
Warren's voice was full of disbelief. So, do you think the baby's father is the groom? What do you think, Valerie? Adele asked me cheerfully. I thought for a moment before replying with a troubled expression.
I don't know. There might be other candidates.
That's possible. Adele laughed heartily, finding my response hilarious. The venue, unable to keep up with the unfolding drama, and my parents were stunned. Feeling sorry for the attendees who got dragged into this, I apologized deeply.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply sorry for showing you such an ugly scene today. I will now take my leave. Wait, Valerie. Goodbye, Warren. I'll be sending you the bill for the divorce settlement later. What?
You can't escape. I've already talked to your parents.
What?
Warren looked back sharply at the rear seats. He seemed to have finally remembered the presence of his parents, who had been glaring at him since the party began. Yes, after the engagement was broken, I made sure to meet with Warren's parents-in-law. Embarrassed but honest, I explained everything, and they were furious on my behalf. I had become close with Warren's mom after the wedding introduction, going shopping together, and discussing party plans and dress consultations. Warren seemed to have forgotten all of this and naively thought his parents wouldn't care if he broke off our engagement and switched to Zoe. Of course, his parents were neither unreasonable nor heartless. Disappointed in their son's behavior, they had already arranged for relatives and business associates not to attend the wedding. Given the disgrace their son showed at the wedding, they were probably relieved not to have invited any family. With the bride's sister and a friend exposing her misdeeds, and an ex-boyfriend who might be the baby's father appearing, the wedding was in chaos. The staff and the MC were huddled in the corner, trying to figure out what to do. Not wanting to cause any more trouble, I left quickly. Adele followed me out. We silently high-fived and then went our separate ways. I got into my friend's truck, which was waiting for me in the parking lot, and headed back to the apartment to load the rest of my things before driving to my new apartment. With my smartphone constantly buzzing, I turned it off. Feeling refreshed, I left my hometown. The wedding, unable to recover, was cancelled. Warren and Alan, one of Zoe's ex-boyfriends, questioned her about the baby's father, but Zoe insisted it was Warren's. Dad, shocked by his sweet daughter's promiscuous life, had a severe blood pressure spike and was hospitalized. Mom, despite being shocked, remained on Zoe's side and cursed me like I was the devil when I came with a lawyer to demand divorce settlement money. Ignoring their mess, I collected the divorce settlement money I was entitled to. I spent the money on a trip with the friends who supported me and saved the rest. I started living a peaceful life in a place where Zoe and my parents couldn't interfere. For me, everything was resolved, but it seemed it wasn't the case for them. A year after the wedding debacle, Warren showed up at my workplace as I was about to leave. I hadn't told him where I worked, but he must have found me through the company's instructor profile.
We were all deceived.
As soon as he saw me, Warren shouted,
The child that woman had wasn't mine. She's a witch who tore us apart.
I had already heard from Mom's one-sided phone call, but it seemed the baby's father was Alan, not Warren. Well, that must have been tough. My words made Warren's eyes fill with tears.
Valerie, it was you who truly loved me all along. I'll leave that devil. Let's start over here from scratch. We can overcome any hardship together.
Warren. Warren gently took my hand. I slapped his hand away forcefully. Are you crazy?
What?
There is no way I would get back together with you.
Why not? I was just deceived by that woman. Don't act like a victim. Even if Zoe deceived you, it doesn't erase the fact that you hurt me.
But, and you're the only one facing difficulties. I heard your brother took over the heir position.
Ugh.
The truth was, in the chaos of the wedding, Warren's parents labeled him as a failure and removed him from the line of succession. Their decision that a man who is unfaithful to his future wife cannot run a business faithfully was completely sound. He had quit his job to become the heir, and now he was unemployed. Rejected by his former workplace, he was in the middle of a job search. Unlike you, I'm not struggling with anything. There's no benefit in getting back together with you, and I don't have a shred of affection left.
Benefit. That's why you got dumped, because you're so calculating.
Sure, and clinging to the woman you dumped isn't calculating?
Guh, gore.
Unable to counter my argument, Warren turned red and groaned. At that moment, my coworkers noticed our argument and gathered around.
Oh, is this the guy? The one who got tricked by that man-eater Zoe and ended up jobless?
Yeah, that's him.
What do you want with Valerie now? Don't you have any pride? If you mess with Valerie, these muscles won't stay silent.
Surrounded by muscular, towering men, Warren screamed and fled. He showed up at work a few more times, but thanks to my coworker's solid guard, he seemed to give up. 3 years later. Just when I thought I was done with relationships, I met a man who was incredibly compatible with me, and we got married. He liked jogging too, and we met while jogging in the park early in the morning. After we started dating, I learned he ran a company. Warren's betrayal had left me traumatized, and I hesitated. Around that time, Zoe's divorce from Warren was finally finalized, and she showed up in front of me. Of course, I no longer considered her my sister. There was no way I would let this homewrecker near my precious partner. But somehow, she found out and appeared when we were out shopping and having tea.
Hey! Valerie, long time no see.
In her usual manner. And naturally, she showed immense interest in my partner and aggressively flirted with him. Oh, am I never going to be free from this monster? But this time, it was different. He brushed off Zoe's hands that were all over him. And he said,
"That's disgusting. You really do want any man who belongs to someone else, don't you? I've never seen someone like that. I can't believe you seduced men with such vulgar behavior. Just looking at you makes me sick."
Feeling reassured by his confident demeanor, I decided to marry him. As for Zoe after the divorce, she never married Alan, the real father of her child. Alan, finally waking up from her spell during the wedding chaos, realized she was a terrible woman. After being harshly rejected by my partner and having her pride as a woman shattered, Zoe went on to pursue other men and had affairs with several married men. But her infidelity was quickly discovered by their wives, and she was sued for compensation from many families. Naturally, Mom came crying to me, but I didn't help. Zoe worked tirelessly to repay her debts, and her once proud skin and hair became ruined. Looking more than 10 years older than her age, no man would be deceived by her anymore. Meanwhile, her child was taken in by Alan's parents and lived comfortably. I'm glad the child didn't end up in a sad situation. Years later, while raising my kids, I still work at the sports gym. Even though my husband's income is more than enough, I love my job. I also help out as the company president's wife, but it's not too burdensome. I even have the leisure to jog with my husband and kids on weekend mornings. Teacher, you always look so young. How do you stay so beautiful? An elderly gym member asked me enviously.
Because I get to do what I love and have a family that supports me.
I felt a little embarrassed and laughed. I didn't have the best family or sister and faced many challenges in life. But meeting a husband who accepts my personality and way of life made it all worth it. All's well that ends well. Today, as always, I'm enjoying my active life with a protein shake made by Bert.
I'm sorry, but I decided to marry Mike.
My sister Anne's words over the phone left me speechless. Marry Mike? Mike is my husband, what the hell is she thinking? I was shocked when Anne called me before, saying she was having an affair with Mike. She had asked me to break up with him then, but I never heard about them getting married. I bit my lip.
How are you going to marry Mike? Ask him when he gets home today. He said he's divorcing you to marry me.
She was relentless, saying her piece and then laughing as she hung up. I was anxious and couldn't sit still until Mike came home from work. He seemed fed up with me, but divorce? What am I supposed to do? My name is Sarah. I'm 40 years old and I work at a clothing store. I have a son and a daughter, but no husband. I got married at 30 and divorced at 35. Let me explain how I ended up marrying and then divorcing my ex-husband, Mike. I met Mike when I was 29. He came into the clothing store where I worked. My store sells both men's and women's clothing, so we get a fair amount of male customers. It was a Sunday afternoon when I saw Mike struggling to pick out clothes and decided to help him.
Are you looking for something?
Yes.
I want to try dressing up for a change.
Mike shyly admitted he wasn't used to picking out stylish clothes. He usually bought affordable clothes randomly and didn't know what would look good. I started picking out clothes that would suit Mike's handsome face. As I selected pieces, I could see his expression brighten.
This outfit is nice. I'll take it. Thank you.
I couldn't help but respond cheerfully, making him smile. I felt embarrassed, but thrilled that he chose the clothes I picked out. I couldn't hide my happiness as I rang up his purchase. After that, he came to my store frequently. As a regular customer, our conversations became lively, and we talked about our hobbies beyond clothes. One day, he handed me a note. When I got home, I saw it was his contact number. I thought long and hard about the store employee-customer relationship before calling him.
Hello? Mike?
I spoke nervously, and I heard his familiar voice on the other end.
Yes. I'm glad you called. I was half giving up hope.
He sounded delighted, his voice higher than usual. We chatted as acquaintances, not as employee and customer. I learned he was 3 years older than me and worked as a salesperson at a well-known brokerage firm. He graduated from a top university, the epitome of an elite career. I wasn't attracted to his status, but as a woman, I was thrilled to meet a serious man like him and exchange contact information. It might sound exaggerated, but I truly felt this was the happiest moment of my life.
Would you like to go on a date sometime?
I'd love to. Mike asked me out, and I readily agreed. After a few dates, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. We clicked from the beginning, sharing the same pace in conversation and similar interests. A year passed, and our relationship continued strong. There was never any doubt about our love for each other, and we decided to get married. I had just turned 30, and it felt like the perfect milestone to get married. Mike was also at an ideal age for marriage, so our parents quickly approved of our union. Thus, we decided to marry after 1 year of dating. Once married, I promptly shared the news with everyone around me. Everyone was happy for us, but I remember feeling embarrassed when my colleagues teased me about meeting him at my store. I was too happy to care much. With the family meetings behind us, we moved into the rental apartment we had leased together and began our married life. In the beginning, our married life was smooth. Mike often came home late because of his job, so I handled most of the household chores. The only thing he did was take out the trash, but my job was mostly shift-based, so I often finished work on time. It felt wrong to ask Mike, who worked 2 to 3 hours of overtime daily, to help more with the chores. "I'm sorry for making you do all the housework, Sarah. It can't be helped. Besides, I like taking care of the house." At first, he seemed to feel guilty about not being able to participate in the chores. It was enough that he felt sorry. I respected his feelings and worked hard to balance my job and the housework. However, things began to change after a year. I got promoted from a regular employee to a store manager. With the promotion came additional responsibilities that had to be handled after regular hours. The higher salary was part of the deal. As a manager, I was determined to create a pleasant work environment for the other staff. As work got busier, I started to neglect household duties.
"We've been eating the same meals a lot lately."
One evening, while eating stew for dinner, Mike commented, "I'm sorry." He was right. Since work had become busier, I had been making dishes like stew or pot au feu that I could prepare in bulk and keep for a few days. It was understandable that he was frustrated with the almost college student-like diet. However, I was too exhausted from work to accept his criticism. I was doing my best to manage the housework despite being busy. If he had complaints about my cooking, he could cook for himself. I almost retorted but ended up just apologizing. From that day, Mike's attitude began to change gradually, which was foreseeable. The next day, when I served the same stew, he visibly grimaced. I felt bad, knowing it was the same as the previous day, but there was still stew left. Even if I told him that I hated eating the same meals every day too, he glanced at me as if to say, "So what?" I felt an urge to run away from the situation. We both worked hard every day. But since becoming a manager, I couldn't shake the sense of inequality between us. Our relationship began to deteriorate after just a year of marriage, but in that first year, I became pregnant with Mike's child. When I told him about the pregnancy, he responded with, "Oh, I see." He didn't seem very happy. Though I was puzzled, I convinced myself he just hadn't yet felt the reality of becoming a father. About 8 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named our son Sam. I took time off work to focus on caring for Sam and managing the house. Before taking maternity leave, I had assumed that work was more challenging than childcare, but reality proved otherwise. Every night was spent waking up every 1 or 2 hours for feedings. I struggled with diaper changes and preparing formula. Sam would cry endlessly for reasons I couldn't understand. I had almost no personal time and was left alone to manage the unfamiliar tasks of childcare while he remained indifferent. Even when I was overwhelmed by the challenges of my first-time parenting, he never offered to help. He acted as if it had nothing to do with him, completely ignoring my struggles. When he came home from work, he exaggerated his fatigue and quickly retreated to the bedroom. Even if he couldn't participate in the childcare, I wished he would at least acknowledge my efforts. I wondered if I was being selfish for feeling this way. However, he was responsible with finances, contributing to our child's future by getting a college savings plan and covering medical checkup expenses. When I wanted to go to the salon, he even hired a helper to give me some free time. While he didn't engage directly in childcare, he wasn't entirely uncooperative. I always questioned his inconsistent behavior. 2 years into my lonely journey of childcare, I gave birth to our second child, a baby girl named Karen. This time around, I managed the challenges more calmly than with my first child. However, taking care of 2 young children alone still required immense patience, especially since our eldest was only 2 years old. By this time, our conversations had dwindled. Mike started working even longer hours, often coming home after I was already asleep. Our lives were completely out of sync. I couldn't help but feel lonely, despite accepting it as the way things were. Yet, I was still happy back then, unaware of what he was really doing after work. Our son, Sam, turned 4, and Karen was now 2. I had returned to work when I was 35, putting both children in a daycare center. Though I was no longer a manager, I accepted my role as a regular employee, as managing a store while raising 2 small children seemed impossible. Therefore, I tried to think that I was fully satisfied with my position as an ordinary employee at work. Then, everything changed that summer. One evening, after picking up the kids from daycare and starting dinner, my rarely used smartphone rang. Seeing Anne's name on the screen surprised me. And, my older sister by 3 years, was a busy stage actress and seldom called. We were never close. And was beautiful, popular with both men and women, while I was plain and reserved. Our parents and friends often compared us, and I was jealous of how everyone adored Anne. Naturally, I never tried to get closer to her. Even as adults, I believed we lived in different worlds. So, her call was shocking. What could she want now? Thinking it might be a mistake, I answered anyway, out of sisterly duty.
Hello?
Finally, you picked up, Sarah. Anne's high-pitched voice wasn't one I wanted to hear for long. What's up? I could hear her take a deep breath on the other end. Well, I'm dating your husband, Mike. So, I'd like you to leave him.
What?
The sudden revelation made me almost drop the knife I was holding. Didn't you hear me? I said, leave him.
What do you mean?
And casually admitted to the affair and asked me to leave my husband. I was too shocked to respond, frozen in place. Fortunately, the kids were asleep after returning from daycare, sparing them from seeing my distressed face.
It's exactly what it sounds like. I've been seeing Mike for a long time. A long time? Since when?
Well, since before your son was born, so about 4 years. I felt dizzy at the length of time. Sam was born about a year after we got married. How could Mike, who used to be so serious, have started an affair with and at such a time?
Mike said he started noticing me during the family meeting. At first, he tried to ignore it because I was his fiance's sister. But then we ran into each other in town. I asked him if he wanted to grab a coffee, and he immediately agreed. After that, it was really easy. He fell for my charms. We went on a few dates after work and then started seeing each other.
I felt nauseous hearing Anne's truth. I couldn't believe that serious him had so easily had an affair with someone like Anne. But thinking back to how he barely talked to me at home, and wasn't very involved in housework or childcare, things started to make sense. A surge of anger rose up against her. She was definitely the one to blame. She had seduced my husband and made him fall for her. She had always been popular with men, so even making my husband like her was probably easy for her. And could do that. Unlike me.
How could you do something so horrible?
I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't seem to show any guilt, and it was really getting on my nerves.
I just laid out the bait. It was Mike who took it. If he really cared about Sarah, my bait would have seemed like trash. But to Mike, it looked like a feast.
She laughed crudely, making me want to punish her right then and there. But since we were only connected by phone, I had no way to confront her physically, only with words. And was much more eloquent than me. So, hurry up and leave him. Clinging to him is pointless. Mike is completely in love with me. And hung up before I could say anything to stop her, leaving behind her cruel words. I was shaken all day. I had never once considered that Mike might be cheating. And of all people. That night, I confronted Mike when he got home late.
Mike, is it true you're having an affair with Anne?
It took a lot of courage to ask. Mike visibly flinched at the unexpected question.
How did you find out?
Instead of denying it, he confirmed it. I stared at him in disbelief.
And called today. She said she's having an affair with you and wants me to leave you.
Mike remained silent, unable to say anything, as if he had no words left. I had hoped he would deny it or at least get upset. Mike and Anne really were having an affair. The fact was crushing me. From then on, every day was chillingly cold at home. Only the children, unaware of anything, continued to play happily as usual. Mike barely interacted with the kids, so I vowed to stay strong and act normally around them. A month after our marriage started falling apart, and called me again.
Hello? What do you want this time?
Sarah, don't be so harsh. Have you thought about what we discussed last time? Anne's high-pitched voice sounds like she's done nothing wrong.
What do you mean, last time?
You know, I asked you to break up with Mike. I can't help but get angry at her words. How long is she going to keep treating me like an idiot? I was about to snap back when she made a shocking statement.
Sorry, but I decided to marry Mike.
I was speechless at her words over the phone. Marry Mike? Mike is my husband. What the hell is she thinking? I was surprised when Anne called me before, saying she was having an affair with Mike. She had asked me to break up with him then too, but I hadn't heard anything about them getting married. I bit my lip.
How could you marry him?
Ask him when he gets home today. He said he wants to divorce you and marry me. And said this firmly, then laughed and hung up the phone. I was anxious and couldn't stay calm until Mike came home from work. Sure, he seemed fed up with me, but divorce? What should I do? That day, I couldn't focus on work at all and went home in a daze, putting the kids to bed. When Mike got home around midnight, I asked him what Anne had said.
Are you planning to marry Anne?
Honestly, I thought Mike wasn't serious about Anne. I thought he was just being tempted and played by her. But Mike, yes, nodded awkwardly.
What?
I felt the blood drain from my face. He really wants to marry her? I stared at him in disbelief.
I was going to tell you today.
Sarah, please, let's divorce.
I want to marry Anne.
With that, Mike took a divorce application form out of his work bag. His section was already filled out. Looking at the form, I felt like crying. Mike was never a man of many words. He hardly ever helped with housework or childcare. Even so, I thought he was working hard for our family. Mike's determination seemed unshakable. His expression indicated that he wouldn't be moved by anything I said. You're the worst. I couldn't help but feel my trust in Mike shatter as I reluctantly accepted the divorce papers. For a moment, Mike looked relieved. I wanted to lash out at him right then, but I held back for the sake of the children, who might wake up. And so, our 5-year marriage came to an end. The only thing I worried about after divorcing Mike was our children. I absolutely did not want to be separated from them. I insisted on this point. In the end, I was granted custody of the children, which brought me some relief. It was also agreed that Mike would send child support every month. Of course, I received a substantial compensation from both Mike and Anne. Despite this, the two of them remained unperturbed and went on to remarry. I had no idea where to direct my frustration. After that, life became really tough. Even though I received child support, I had to support the household entirely on my own. I realized how much Mike had financially supported us until now. I worked part-time at a clothing store and did as much freelance work as I could at home. Even then, it was all I could do to make ends meet, and there was no way I could take the children on vacations or do fun activities. I felt sorry for the children, but seeing their smiles when we played at the local park made me determined to work even harder for them. As I desperately worked, 5 years flew by. One Sunday afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone.
Who could it be?
I wondered as I answered the call, thinking it might be a wrong number or a sales call. Hello? Sarah? The faintly familiar voice made me search my memory for someone I knew. I realized it was Mary, Mike's mother, who I had not seen since my divorce from Mike 5 years ago.
Mary!
I asked cautiously, not wanting to embarrass myself if I was wrong.
Yes, it's me. I'm sorry to call you out of the blue.
She knew that Mike had cheated on me, leading to our divorce. So, she probably felt a sense of guilt towards me. She had always been a timid person, but now her voice sounded even more frail than usual.
Is there something you need?
Getting a call from Mary now made me feel uneasy. Yes. I'll be straightforward. My son, Mike, passed away from terminal cancer yesterday.
What?
I couldn't believe the words I was hearing. Mike passed away from terminal cancer? It was hard to believe. When he was living with me, he never seemed to have any health issues. I'm sorry to shock you. We are still struggling to accept it ourselves. He was only 43. It was liver cancer, and by the time it was discovered, it was already terminal. I felt a mix of emotions. Mike had betrayed me and married Anne. There was no room for forgiveness for that. Even though he was dead, it didn't change the fact that he had wronged me. Still, I couldn't help but feel shaken by the news of his death. He wrote a will, and he mentioned you in it. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you come see us? I'd like you to hear his final wishes.
All right.
I was surprised to hear that Mike had mentioned me in his will. We had barely communicated since our divorce. Why would he mention me now? Despite my apprehension, I decided to follow Mary's request. A week later, after Mike's funeral, his relatives gathered together. I left the children with my parents and headed to the place Mary had specified. It's been a while, Sarah. Seeing Anne, I didn't know how to respond, so I ignored her. And looked a little haggard, her once beautiful face now appearing exhausted and worn out. Her sharp personality added a hint of intimidation to her presence. Even with Mike gone, I felt not an ounce of sympathy for Anne. I would never forgive her for stealing Mike away from me, not in this lifetime. Finally, the executor opened the will and began reading its contents aloud. The entire family watched quietly, waiting with bated breath. You see, after marrying Anne, Mike had been promoted to a company executive position. Naturally, his salary must have skyrocketed as a result. Furthermore, during our marriage, he had acquired numerous assets, including real estate properties. We divided them during the divorce, but there should still be a substantial amount remaining. I wasn't sure how much the relatives knew about this, but Anne was certainly aware of Mike's wealth. She even seemed to be eagerly anticipating how much of the assets would be left to her. The executor read through the will's contents in order. That's when we were hit with a shocking revelation. Incredibly, it stated that all the assets were to be given to me, while all the liabilities were to be transferred to Anne. Of course, considering the legal portion, the part about giving me everything meant that Anne, as his wife, would also receive a share. However, as a childless couple, Anne had expected to inherit the entire estate, so she became visibly agitated and furious.
Wait a minute. What's the meaning of this? Why are the liabilities going to me? And why is Sarah, who's supposed to be divorced, receiving assets? Sarah, were you secretly involved with Mike?
And screamed, her hair disheveled as she lunged forward, grabbing my collar.
I don't know. I barely saw Mike after our divorce. I had forgotten about him until I was summoned here today. What? That can't be true. Then why are you being favored in the will? That's...
Honestly, I was just as perplexed. Why on earth would Mike leave me, a non-heir? A portion of his estate in his will? I was utterly confused by this unexpected turn of events. At that moment, Mary stepped forward, holding an envelope in her hand. The will was in the possession of the court-appointed executor, so this appeared to be something else entirely.
And the answer to your question is written in this letter,
Mary announced in a clear voice, and turned to face Mary, a look of surprise on her face.
What do you mean?
You see, this letter was written by Mike while he was in the hospital and handed to me before he passed. Unlike the will, it simply expresses Mike's thoughts and feelings. But the contents were so important that I decided to reveal this letter if anything happened. I'll read it now. Mary opened the letter Mike had allegedly written and began reading its contents. This is what it said. Ever since he started complaining about feeling unwell, and had inexplicably begun feeding him only heavily flavored foods. Dishes that were clearly high in salt, sugar, and syrup. Moreover, she started making a lot of fried foods, which she had never done before, claiming they were too much of a hassle to clean up afterward. When he pointed this out to her,
I'm just in the mood for strong flavors,
she would dismissively say. Finding it suspicious, one night he pretended to be asleep and overheard and talking on the phone with someone outside his room. The content of,
his illness will worsen soon. Then I'll share some of the inheritance with you.
The conversation was appalling. It became clear that and was trying to push him to his limits. That's why he decided not to leave her any assets. Instead, he wanted to bequeath them to Sarah. The truth was, during his marriage to Sarah, he was so busy with work that he hardly had time for family matters. I truly loved Sarah and the kids, but I was too awkward and couldn't do anything for them. Please forgive me. I'm ashamed of my weakness of heart that led me to cheat. I hope you can find happiness with the children from now on. The atmosphere in the room changed dramatically when Mary read Mike's letter aloud.
Is it true that and drove Mike to the edge? Isn't that going a bit too far?
The relatives glared at Anne. I was dumbfounded by the unexpected contents of the letter. But I couldn't help but be moved by the fact that Mike loved me and the children. Mike. I'm the one who should be sorry. I regretted not being there for Mike when he was having a hard time at work. Mary rubbed my back. I couldn't stop crying.
What's with this letter? Saying I drove Mike to the edge? Ridiculous. This letter must be a fake.
And insisted that she was not guilty. But Mary went up to Anne and said,
It's not fake. This handwriting is definitely Mike's. You committed a crime and don't even reflect on it. You have no right to receive Mike's assets. Leave this place right now.
She scolded Anne. With a terrifying expression on her face, I trembled as I listened beside her.
What? It's useless to say anything to this family. Fine. I'm never coming back to this house again. Don't ever appear in front of me again either.
I shouted on impulse. I'm tired of a life manipulated by Anne. I will firmly accept Mike's wishes and find happiness with the children. And left us, raving mad.
Mary, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything for you when I heard Sarah and Mike were getting divorced. Please be happy with your grandchildren.
I'm really glad Mary is such a good person. I took Mike's feelings to heart and went home. Since then, and has been saddled with a huge debt due to the negative assets Mike left her, and it seems Anne, who was a Broadway actress, stopped getting work after marrying Mike, perhaps due to aging. Having lost her job as a Broadway actress, and had no choice but to depend on Mike financially. Still, Mike worked hard for his wife, but at first he probably never imagined that Anne was making meals that would make him sick in order to get his inheritance. Mike had become a company executive, and even without targeting an inheritance, he should have been able to live a relatively affluent life if he lived normally. Nevertheless, the fact that she was after his inheritance means that Anne had no love for Mike. From the beginning, she seduced him for his money and tried to get the inheritance by making me and Mike divorce. I was horrified by her ugly thoughts. But even her is now living a hellish life every day. Because the man Anne was cheating with and trying to steal the inheritance with was caught for another fraud scheme. Naturally, because Anne's existence was also revealed, she ended up being sent to the FBI. She also has the crime of trying to take Mike's life, so she probably won't be able to move from the FBI for a while. Even if she's sent to prison and gets out, what awaits her is repayment of the debts Mike saddled her with. I didn't feel the slightest bit sorry for Anne's bleak future ahead. I want her to reflect properly. And I sincerely hope she never makes the same mistake again. Meanwhile, with the assets passed on from Mike, the kids and I went on our first trip to Hawaii. Seeing them both looking so happy makes me feel blissful. During our marriage, he seemed awkward and at a loss with how to interact with the kids, but now I know he truly loved them. From now on, I want to spend happy days with the children while being grateful to Mike, who left me such precious treasures. The quiet of the room was shattered by the ringtone of a mobile phone. Grabbing the phone, the screen showed an incoming call from the daycare center attended by MIL Karen, causing a rush to answer.
Hello, this is Barbara. What's the matter? Is something wrong with Karen?
My hurried words, perhaps too fast, seemed not to be fully understood by the staff on the other end, who, instead of answering my question, began explaining the situation.
Actually, Karen has become quite ill. She's running a high fever, so we wanted to inform you. We can only provide first aid here. A fever, got it. I'll be there right away.
I immediately left the house and drove to the hospital. Luckily, by the time we arrived at the hospital, it seemed that the foreign medication had helped, and Karen's condition had stabilized. Bringing Karen back home, now with her fever somewhat reduced, we found ourselves unable to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn, and we were both utterly baffled. Ringing the doorbell, my husband John eventually appeared.
Oh, you're back?
I changed the locks, couldn't stand the smell anymore.
I've made it so you and Mom can't enter the house anymore.
Sleep in the garden or park.
Cut it out. Karen's running a fever. I need to get her to bed, so open up.
John continued to mutter like a scolded child. My anger reaching its breaking point, I pulled out my mobile phone and called someone right then and there.
That's enough. Just remember, I won't be there when you regret this. Huh? Save your sleep talk for bed. I'll never regret it.
John, with a sneer as if mocking Karen's fever and my desperation, spat those words and slammed the front door shut, locking it with force.
Barbara, could you grab that sauce for me?
Sure, Karen.
Sorry to always have you help with cooking.
It's okay. This is about all I can help with anyway. At 30, after breaking up with my then boyfriend, I spent months unable to forget him, dragging the weight of our past in my heart, thinking perhaps a new encounter in a pub might help me move on. The cycle of drinking to forget him for even a moment, only to spiral into pessimism, was relentless. Returning to the home I shared with him, where his belongings still remained, only brought the loneliness surging back. Yet, there was this one day. As usual, after work, I went to the pub alone, trying to fill the void inside me with a drink. The place was getting crowded, and a server asked me,
"Would it be all right if we seated someone else at your table?"
Feeling lonely drinking by myself, I agreed. Looking back, had I refused that day, I'd probably still be single and drinking alone right now. It was John who, by chance, was also at the pub and, with no seats available, ended up joining me for a drink.
"This place is always bustling, isn't it?"
Truly. Do you come here often for a drink?
"No, actually, it's my first time. I saw you from outside, and when I entered, they happened to seat me at your table by chance."
Even as I wondered if such dramatic encounters were even possible, I found myself enjoying drinks and conversation with John. As we shared our hobbies and work grievances, we clicked and exchanged contact information, heading to another pub together. The conversation never dwindled at the next pub, and as we drank, I thought how nice it would be to have someone like him by my side. Naturally, the talk shifted towards relationships. When I mentioned I had broken up with my boyfriend about 6 months ago, John shared that he too had ended a relationship about a year ago and was feeling the loneliness. Finding we had not only hobbies and job frustrations in common, but even our romantic pasts, I felt a sense of fate in meeting John. Under the dim lights, I took a leap and confessed to John, who I had just met that day. John looked surprised at first, but then looked straight into my eyes and accepted my confession. That was the beginning of what led to our marriage. We started living together at John's place with the intention to marry and got married 3 months later. Now, it's John, Emil, Karen, and I living as a family of 3. Karen, not very good at cooking, has been teaching me, and I've gotten quite better at it, enough to cook together. But even those happy days of cooking with Karen abruptly ended one day with a loud crash. It happened when I was out of the house for about 2 hours, due to a sudden request from a friend. Karen had offered to go grocery shopping for dinner in my stead. Though she was older and had been dealing with back issues, she had been advised by her doctor that moving around for daily chores was actually better, so I thoughtlessly asked her to do the shopping. In the evening, as I finished my errands, I received a call from Karen's doctor, informing me that she had missed a step on the stairs and injured herself. I also informed John, but he was too busy with work and couldn't make it within visiting hours, so I went to the hospital alone. Arriving at the hospital, I saw Karen lying in bed. The nurse told me that she had slipped on the supermarket stairs, fallen, and sustained a hairline fracture in her lumbar spine, and was currently under anesthesia to manage the pain.
"Karen, are you all right? I heard about the hairline fracture in your back."
"Barbara, I'm sorry. I've caused you trouble. And I messed up the groceries a bit."
"Don't worry about that. You're more important than the groceries. John can't come because of work, but he might call later. I'll explain the situation to him too."
"I'm sorry for causing trouble." Seeing Karen downcast, possibly because of her injury, I made a point to smile and told her to focus on her recovery before heading home for the day. When John came back from work late at night and I told him about Karen, he seemed not to worry much. Feeling a bit upset with John's indifferent attitude towards his mom's injury, attributing it to her age. After a while, Karen switched to home care, and I arranged for her transport to the hospital, checked on her during my days off or before going to work, and even arranged for her to attend a daycare service for rehabilitation. During Karen's rehab and daycare sessions, I received a call from my Sael, Mary, who had heard about the situation. Unlike us living in the countryside, she was bustling in the city among skyscrapers and crowds. Showing concern for Karen, unlike the indifferent John. Mary and I have always had a friendly relationship, and I've been receiving her help. With Mary's base being in the city, she couldn't easily visit for condolences, so she offered financial support for the hospital bills and medication. John, known for his aversion to effort, was not cooperative with daily chores or helping with Karen's laundry. Even when I was on the phone with the diligent Mary, John seemed uncomfortable. Possibly due to their not-so-good relationship since childhood, and he started acting like a henpecked husband, seemingly out of spite towards me for being friendly with Mary. "Leave Mom alone. Barbara, I'm out of booze. Bring me the beer from the fridge, will you?"
John, don't be so harsh on Barbara, who's always working hard. Who do you think ensures you have a warm meal to eat?
Mary, laughing about her good-for-nothing brother, always sided with me, scolding John over the phone whenever he became arrogant, but John kept sulking and, this time, went to get his beer himself.
I really don't understand how John managed to marry such a good person. If there's anything other than Mom's issue bothering you, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you so much, as always. I'll keep in touch about Karen or if anything comes up.
Thanks to Mary's financial support, we were able to continue with Karen's rehab and daycare services, and I was able to focus more on support. Karen had spoken so highly of me to the daycare staff that, unbeknownst to me, my reputation among them had risen.
When I talked about you to the people at the daycare service, they said you seem like such a wonderful person.
I got so happy, I ended up bragging about you a lot.
Thanks for the promotion.
I could only give a wry smile at the time, but thinking about how Karen must have really wanted to talk about me made her seem even more adorable, and I didn't feel bad about it. However, a tragic event would soon befall Karen, who had so endearingly promoted me at the daycare service. It was supposed to be my day off, but I ended up having to do some remote work due to an emergency meeting and document review. While I was focused on my work, the ringtone of my mobile phone suddenly filled the quiet room. Picking up the phone, I saw an incoming call from the daycare service Karen attends. Normally, I wouldn't receive calls from the daycare service except for pickup times, so I hurriedly answered the phone.
Hello, Barbara speaking. What's happened? Is something wrong with Karen?
Perhaps because I was hurried, my words came out quickly and the staff didn't answer my question directly but instead started explaining the situation.
Actually, Karen has become quite ill. She has a high fever, so we contacted you. We can only provide first aid here. A high fever, understood. I'll be right there. Karen has cold medicine in her pouch. Please give her that.
The fever was so high that I immediately messaged my boss, saying that my MIL was sick, and without waiting for a reply, I rushed out of the house and drove to the daycare. Despite the sudden notice, my boss replied while I was on the way to the hospital, assuring me that work was fine. Feeling relieved, I pressed the accelerator and headed to Karen. For most people, a cold might not be a big deal with medication, but for an 85-year-old, it could be a matter of life and death. The only first aid available would likely be cooling down the fever with an ice pack.
I'm glad I had Karen carry her medicine. We need to get her to the hospital quickly.
About 10 minutes later, I arrived at the facility just in time to see Karen being wheeled out in a wheelchair. With the staff's help, I got her into the car and drove straight to the hospital. Fortunately, by the time we arrived at the hospital, the medication had taken effect, and after receiving N4, we were told to give her the current medication if the fever returns. The condition stabilized significantly after the 4, and Karen, who had been sleeping due to the fever and medication, woke up and was able to converse normally.
I'm really sorry for worrying you again, Barbara. Maybe I overdid it and that's why I got a fever.
Indeed, I've heard from the daycare staff and the person in charge of her back rehabilitation that she's been doing well. Perhaps the high fever was the result of Karen overexerting herself, just as she said. It's important to try hard, but it's not good to overdo it and collapse, right? I would feel the same way, and if Mary were here right now, she might even scold Karen, you know? True. If Mary were here, she'd probably scold me loudly. I'll be more careful from now on. As we engaged in light conversation, the time for the 4 quickly passed, and we were able to return home that day. Bringing Karen, whose fever had somewhat subsided, home, we found ourselves unable to unlock the door, completely puzzled as the key wouldn't turn at all. Seeing the lights on inside, it was clear John had already returned home. I rang the doorbell and tried to let us in through WhatsApp, indicating we were outside. John, noticing the doorbell, came to the entrance with the chain lock still on, showing his face unnaturally. Oh, you're back?
Why is the chain locked? Karen has a fever. Hurry up and unlock the door. And why won't the key fit?
Don't talk all at once. I changed the locks. Couldn't stand the smell anymore. Made it so you and Mom can't enter. Sleep in the garden or park.
What? That's something a child would say. Cut it out. Karen has a fever. I want to get her to bed, so open up.
John, please open it.
Noisy, I'm fed up with being disregarded by Mom, who never acknowledges how hard I try, always siding with Barbara and Mary.
Frustrated with John's endless childlike ranting, I took out my mobile phone and contacted someone. It was a gamble whether they would answer so late, but the call was promptly picked up. I quietly explained the situation to avoid John hearing and ended the call after getting an agreement. No matter who you call, my mind won't change. Barbara and Mom sleep outside, all right?
That's fine. Just remember, I won't be there when you regret this. Huh? Save your sleep talk for bed. I'll never regret it.
John, with a sneer as if mocking Karen's fever and my urgency, closed the door forcefully and locked it. Why has John become like this? I'm really sorry, Barbara. It's all right, Karen. I can handle it. Initially, I thought about spitefully sleeping in the garden. I wouldn't mind doing so alone, but with Karen having a fever, it was not an option. Sleeping in the car was a possibility, but prioritizing Karen's health, we returned to the hospital, where Karen could stay overnight as an inpatient. After dropping Karen off at the hospital, I decided to spend the night at an internet cafe located about 5 minutes away by car. The next day, feeling utterly unrest and even more exhausted due to the unfamiliar environment, I went to pick up Karen. Considering our precarious lodging situation, I remembered Mary's offer to consult her anytime and immediately contacted her.
He must be fed up with us and trying to drive us out of the house. Unable to win by argument, he resorted to drastic measures. It must be his intention to drive out Mom, changing the locks and all. By the way, where did you sleep?
I managed to have Karen stay at the hospital for the night, and I stayed at a nearby internet cafe. But since we can't return home, I was wondering what to do next. Discussing the difficulty of recuperating in unfamiliar environments with a sick Karen, Mary astonishingly offered to help by introducing us to a hotel run by her acquaintance. I'll take care of the costs, just stay there for now. I'll finish up my work as quickly as I can and come over. With that, Mary, citing work commitments, ended the call and sent the hotel's location. For a moment, I wondered if it was okay to rely on Mary to this extent, but considering Karen's situation, there was no room for hesitation. I decided to pick up Karen and head to the hotel. Karen's condition had improved since spending a night at the hospital, though she still had a slight fever and was advised to continue taking her medication and rest. She likely never imagined she would experience such a high fever at over 80 years old. Despite appearing cheerful, I knew we were pushing her limits.
Barbara, were you okay last night? Where did you sleep?
It's fine. I stayed at a nearby internet cafe. More importantly, Mary has arranged for us to stay at a hotel run by her acquaintance, so we're sorted for accommodation now. Knowing that Mary had arranged for a hotel stay seemed to reassure Karen a bit, and we got into the car headed for the hotel. Luckily, the hotel was only about 15 minutes' drive from the hospital. Mentioning Mary at the reception, it seemed they were already informed, and we were promptly shown to our room. The room we were given was surprisingly the most luxurious one, so grand that we wouldn't have easily afforded it even as regular tourists. While grateful, I couldn't help feeling somewhat guilty for the extravagance. Exploring the opulent interior in awe, a woman came into the room. It turned out she was the owner, a longtime friend of Mary's since high school, and they had even once competed for the same man, she shared with a sense of fun that suggested a deep friendship. After explaining to Karen that we had been driven out of our home by John and to rest after the stress of moving, I decided to try contacting John again. Hoping that his actions might have been impulsive due to being drunk, I dialed his number, harboring a faint hope for an apology. However, the mobile phone was off and unreachable. Resigning to wait for Mary's arrival, I focused once more on caring for Karen. 3 days later, in the afternoon, the owner came to inform us of Mary's arrival. "Karen, Mom, sorry for being late." After a brief chat with the owner at the hotel entrance, Mary came to our room and brought us snacks. While enjoying coffee, I explained in detail what had happened. "Locked out. We have no idea what John is doing inside the house or the current state of the home. Didn't we install a fall prevention rail or a camera by Karen's bed for emergencies?" Remembering the camera I had installed for checking via mobile phone, I quickly took out my phone to view the current footage. The camera successfully displayed the room's image, allowing us to see inside the closed-off house. There were several cameras, each placed as hidden cameras in Karen's bedroom and other rooms she would use. Naturally, Karen's bedroom showed nothing, and there was nothing of concern in the toilet or washroom either. Watching the footage and checking for anything captured became oddly enjoyable despite the circumstances. The camera view switched to the entrance, and Mary suddenly pointed out something on the screen, asking us to pause. "Isn't that Barbara's coat?" Pointed out by Mary was a trendy, expensive-looking coat.
No, I don't own such an expensive coat. Plus, I always put my coats back in the closet, so it's strange for one to be at the entrance.
Does this mean it belongs to someone else? Let's check the footage from areas we haven't seen yet. Switching to the living room footage as per Mary's instruction, we saw John and an unknown woman eating together like a couple. The camera also recorded audio, and from their conversation, it was revealed that the woman's name was Elizabeth and that she was having an affair with John. Further watching and listening revealed that they had plans to marry someday and that Elizabeth disliked the elderly Karen, leading to our expulsion to give them space.
What is this? Kicking out Karen and Barbara, only to have his affair partner over.
I regretted my earlier leniency, wishing I could confront my past self for considering forgiveness if he had just apologized. How had John become such a man, to drive out his sick mother and me for an affair? I felt a mix of anger and sadness rising within me. Our minds were made up. I discussed the situation with the daycare service we relied on and, after ensuring Karen's stable condition post-recovery at the hotel, decided to confront John to uncover the whole truth.
He should be at his office by this time. Let's go. We'll make John confess everything in front of Barbara and ensure he apologizes.
After delivering Karen to the daycare facility, we headed to John's workplace. Claiming to be John's wife, I proceeded to his department, maintaining my dignity as his spouse.
Excuse me, I'm John Williams's wife. I've come to deliver something he forgot.
Amidst the commotion and smiles from John's colleagues, the faces of John and Elizabeth, unexpectedly a coworker, darkened. Successfully infiltrating, Mary and I first called John out alone, and then using his mobile phone, invited Elizabeth to discuss matters at a cafe. Sitting across from each other, John and Elizabeth opposite us, we ordered coffee. No one drank, and in the ensuing silence, an eerie atmosphere enveloped us. Reaching her limit with the tense atmosphere, Mary presented the infamous footage as evidence of the affair to both of them. Contrary to our expectations of them being flustered by the incontrovertible evidence, they brazenly defended their actions as if it was the most natural thing in the world.
What's wrong with that? It's my business who I spend my time with at home. We're in love. Elizabeth sees me for who I am, unlike Barbara and Mary.
Yes, we love each other.
I've always heard how Barbara neglects John.
We had previously arranged for someone to come to the cafe. Facing John and Elizabeth's arrogance.
Going to call a lawyer now?
But their confidence vanished instantly when the person arrived. Turning pale. Sorry for being late. Traffic was a bit heavy.
Why are you here, boss?
Indeed, the person I had called was John's company's CEO. I had attempted to secure an appointment since the day we were driven out, and during our stay at the hotel, I managed to discuss our situation. The CEO was aware of our circumstances because, as it turns out, his mother uses the same daycare service Karen attends, and Karen herself had directly informed him of the situation.
John Williams, was it? Your actions are inhumane, neglecting your mother and wife, aren't they? I think it's inappropriate for a CEO to comment on my personal affairs. I love Elizabeth, and just like at work, I eliminate obstacles to efficiency.
That's right, boss. We haven't done anything wrong. Barbara is the one mistreating John and playing the victim. Perhaps deciding enough was enough, the CEO revealed something we weren't aware of.
However, claiming to be on business yet engaging in adultery at home during work hours is wrong, both as a person and as an employee, isn't it, John Williams?
This revelation surprised not me but Mary, who reached her breaking point first. Grabbing John by the chest, she showed an anger far beyond her usual scolding over the phone. We had to calm Mary down, fearing she might escalate further. It's understandable why Mary was so furious. Being career-oriented, her work always came first, and it was her dedication that allowed us to stay at the hotel. Learning that John had committed adultery during work hours and driven his family out for it understandably enraged her.
That's the situation. As you both might understand, the company cannot keep employees who engage in such activities during work hours. You're both fired.
Really? John desperately pleaded with the CEO to reconsider the termination, but the CEO's decision was final, leaving with a simple,
"Unfortunate."
With that, the CEO left for his next appointment, leaving us in the aftermath of his decisive action.
Just got fired, but as for the divorce proceedings and the compensation you're after, I'll sign the divorce papers as you wish.
Standing there, unable to grasp the reality of what just happened, I added insult to injury with my statement to the two of them.
Fine, I'll do the compensation and the divorce if it means I can be rid of Barbara. I'll have nothing to do with Mary or Mom from now on. Now we can finally build a happy home together.
Despite being fired and facing demands for compensation and divorce within minutes, they're unfazed, childlike defiance was baffling. But as they said, this meant I no longer had to deal with John, and we could return to our home.
But I'm taking the house. Excuse me?
I looked it up before.
Selling that house now would bring in a significant amount of money. We'll sell the house and move abroad to live a comfortable life.
Hearing this, I was sure John knew nothing about the house or family matters, only what suited them.
John, you really don't know anything.
That house is in Karen's name, including the land rights.
So, John, you have no house or land to sell.
How do you plan to live abroad?
John, you might seem confident, but you have nothing left. No money, no status, no relationships.
John, shocked by the truth, realized he had been cornered since being fired. Suddenly changing his tone, John approached us in a panic, trying to ingratiate himself. But his efforts were futile. Elizabeth, witnessing our exchange, visibly recoiled at John's pathetic display. No surprise there. Seeing someone you admire crumble under pressure and attempt to ingratiate themselves with those in power would be off-putting to anyone.
By the way, John, Karen was listening to our conversation over the phone. If you have anything to say, now's your chance.
As Mary handed over the phone, John snatched it, desperately apologizing. However, no words of forgiveness came from the phone.
John, I may have raised you wrong, but I don't recall raising someone who doesn't value family. I no longer consider you my son. Don't show yourself to us again.
Karen's final words to John were of severance. John, unable to hide his shock at the final words,
"Are you abandoning me?"
received no reply as Karen had already hung up. Leaving John and a consoling Elizabeth behind, I placed the signed divorce papers on the table and left the cafe in high spirits. Deciding to at least pay for the coffee, I approached the cashier, only to learn the CEO had already covered the bill.
Typical of the CEO, discreetly taking care of the payment.
We'll have to thank him next time. Later, we had a locksmith open and then change the locks to prevent John's entry, eventually selling the house. The proceeds were planned for Karen's care, not at a daycare service but a proper care facility. After being fired, John and Elizabeth managed to convince Karen to speak to the CEO, leading to a 1-month suspension instead of termination, allowing John to return to work. However, rather than work earnestly, the two found themselves in financial difficulties and eventually dipped into the company's funds, which was discovered during a tax audit, resulting in John's dismissal. This betrayal was complete, not just to Karen but also to the CEO who had given him a second chance. Along with this, rumors of driving Karen out to live with his affair partner spread quickly, and feeling uncomfortable, John and Elizabeth ended up separating. John even reached out to me and Mary, hoping for assistance in some way. Needless to say, we wanted nothing to do with him, setting all communications to ignore, completely cutting off contact. Without anyone's help, John and Elizabeth struggled, unable to secure interviews for new jobs, likely due to rumors of their misconduct. Even when John managed to find work at a small company, he couldn't fit in, leading to a series of resignations and a descent into poverty as their savings dwindled. Contrasting their downfall, my life improved significantly. With Karen's care entrusted to a facility, I found time for myself, and through Mary's introduction, I ventured into a new job, finding it fulfilling.
Barbara, how's work?
Are you managing well?
It was tough learning everything from scratch, but now I genuinely enjoy my work. I hope to find a hobby while working, just like Mary.
That's good to hear. I'm doing well too. The staff here are kind, and I've even made some friends. Thanks to you and Mary, I'm enjoying my days here. Thank you.
The thanks are all mine. Mary's visiting soon, So we'll go out together again.
Karen, once feverish and frail, is now vibrant and healthy. Unbeknownst to her, Karen's welcoming smile energizes me and Mary every time we visit the care facility. I hope Karen spends the rest of her life smiling.
Grandma, I'm hungry. What's for lunch?
It was just before noon when my daughter Amelia, who was expecting her second child, brought her son Joseph back home. Joseph, waving his hands cheerfully, looked so adorable, and I replied with a warm heart.
For lunch, we have Amelia's favorite omelet rice. Do you like it too, Joseph? Yeah. I love omelet rice.
Joseph, spinning around with his arms raised in joy. Then, a loud noise came from the direction of the cupboard.
Amelia?
Rushing towards the cupboard, I found Amelia leaning tiredly on the desk, looking exhausted.
Are you okay?
Just as I stepped closer to support Amelia, something unbelievable happened right before my eyes. A small shadow moved incredibly fast towards Amelia and, with all its might, kicked her in the stomach.
What?
Amelia crouched down, and before her stood the small shadow.
Joseph?
Incredibly, the little shadow that had kicked Amelia, holding her stomach, was Joseph. I was stunned and incredulous for a moment but quickly scolded Joseph.
Hey, Joseph! What are you doing to Mom?
Are you okay, Amelia? I immediately went to Amelia's side and whispered to her. Yes. I'm sorry. Amelia kept apologizing desperately. It was a huge shock to me that Joseph, so adorable and honest, would kick Amelia in the stomach. My husband Stephen, having witnessed everything, approached with a look full of anger. Joseph, I won't get mad, but explain why you did that. Joseph, with a puzzled look, said,
What? It's discipline?
Discipline? What does that mean? I, Olivia, have been supporting my husband Stephen for 35 years, and this year I finally turned 60. We have one child, our 31-year-old daughter Amelia. I've dedicated my life to being a housewife, focusing on household chores and raising our child, while Stephen, even though he worked, always found time to spend with Amelia on weekends and before bedtime. Amelia was the daughter we always wanted, and we raised her with all the love we could give from the moment she was in the womb. Especially Stephen, who had wanted a girl since we got married, showed an incredible amount of adoration. He gave her everything she wanted, from clothes and toys to snacks. And, without telling me, he even took her to game centers and shopping malls, which I found out about when Amelia got older. Amelia grew up to be a straightforward, cheerful girl who never went through a rebellious phase and was always full of smiles. She got married at 28 to Christopher and has been helping out with the restaurant owned by her in-laws in Christopher's hometown. I've only met Christopher's parents at the face-to-face meeting and the wedding, with little interaction otherwise. Christopher seemed serious but strong-willed, yet it appeared that calm Amelia had a softening effect on his personality. We thought Amelia, being our pampered child, would continue to live with us even after marrying Christopher. However, after days of pleading and talking about Christopher, Amelia convinced us, and before we knew it, she had left the family home. For a while after their marriage began, Amelia called us daily.
Dad? I made a delicious pot au feu today. Typical Amelia. Your pot au feu is always delicious. Christopher is lucky to eat your wonderful cooking every day.
Those simple exchanges filled our days with happiness, but they didn't last long. The calls became less frequent, from every other day to once a week, then once a month. At first, her happiness was evident, but as the calls became less frequent, they were often cut short because the store was busy. Even when Stephen tried every trick to keep the conversation going, he was often cut off. When I messaged Amelia, worried, her replies were not immediate, and sometimes there were days she didn't respond at all, which worried me. The birth of Amelia's first child, Joseph, was also communicated via message. However, after much pestering from Stephen and me, we finally met our much-longed-for grandson when Joseph turned 1, and since then, their visits home have been limited to once or twice a year. Despite feeling uneasy about Amelia's reluctance to come home when asked, time passed, and before we knew it, Joseph was old enough to start elementary school. We hardly heard from Amelia and her family, leaving us clueless about their lives. Stephen mentioned making several calls, but they never connected, much to his dismay. One evening, just after we finished dinner, the phone rang.
Hello?
Hi, Mom, is now a good time?
Yes, it's fine.
It was Amelia, calling for the first time in 6 months. Perhaps guessing from the look on my face, Stephen glanced over, prompting me to switch to speakerphone so he could hear too.
I'm about to give birth and was thinking of coming home, but I wonder if it's an inconvenience?
When did you get pregnant, Amelia? Stephen jumped up from his seat, as surprised by my words as I was by the news.
Really, Amelia? Did I not mention it? My due date is the 23rd.
We had no idea.
Really? Sorry, but yeah, I got pregnant. I've chosen a hospital and went for a few checkups. Sorry for the after-the-fact approval.
Despite the happy news, Amelia's voice sounded somber and hesitant.
Is it really okay? I know you and Dad are busy, and I hate to be a bother.
It seemed Amelia was more concerned about imposing on us with her return than the impending birth.
A bother? You're always welcome here.
Stephen eagerly replied before I could. That's right. We're always looking forward to you and Joseph visiting.
Thank you. Then I'll be in your care.
With those few words, Amelia ended the call.
Amelia? Amelia?
The abruptness left Stephen calling into the phone, but only the sound of the call ending responded.
Is Amelia okay?
Stephen gripped the phone, murmuring as if speaking directly to Amelia. Something was off with Amelia. I've never heard her sound so down. The joy of hearing our daughter's voice after so long was overshadowed by worry due to her uncharacteristically subdued demeanor. The following week, the day for Amelia and Joseph to return arrived. We went to the bus terminal early in the morning and waited eagerly. Soon, Amelia appeared, holding Joseph's hand.
Amelia! Joseph!
Stephen rushed over, waving enthusiastically.
Mom, who is that?
Joseph, noticing Stephen, didn't seem to remember him, having not met in over 3 years.
That's your granddad, and I'm your grandma.
Amelia approached with an apologetic look, greeting us. As they got closer, Stephen, trying to hide his shock at not being recognized, greeted them with a forced smile.
Amelia. Joseph. Have you been well?
Dad. Amelia's face stiffened, perhaps reading Stephen's expression. And she whispered something to Joseph.
Grandpa, Grandma will be in your care for a while.
Of course. Your family, so feel free to rely on us as much as you need. It was clear Amelia had instructed Joseph on what to say, so Stephen responded reassuringly. It saddened us to think Amelia felt the need to be considerate towards us, her parents. Joseph, resembling a younger Amelia, seemed to be clingy, constantly seeking praise.
Anyway, you must be tired after the long journey.
No, it's okay. Yet, Amelia looked noticeably paler and thinner than before.
Amelia, have you lost weight? Are you eating properly?
Yes. Amelia averted her eyes and began rubbing her arms defensively, avoiding my gaze. Then, noticing Amelia wouldn't even try to meet my eyes, looking downcast, I harbored some doubts. Stephen seemed to notice our daughter's odd behavior as well, suddenly turning serious.
Since it's been a while since you've come home, now is the time to be completely spoiled.
Yeah, thank you. However, Amelia's hesitant response made Stephen and me exchange glances and tilt our heads in confusion. Arriving home and in an attempt to take a breather, I decided to make some herbal tea, and Amelia entered the kitchen offering to help.
Amelia, you can rest, you know?
I can do it too, it's okay. Amelia, somewhat forcefully taking a dishcloth and starting to wipe the dining table, had a faint sweat on her forehead.
What's gotten into you, Amelia, being suddenly so independent?
It was unlike her. She had never even shown a hint of defiance to me before, but now she was turning her back on me as if she had changed.
It's nothing big. I've just come to understand the hardships of being a mom.
While she diligently wiped, speaking indifferently, she seemed so likely to collapse that I had no choice but to make her lie down in bed forcibly. Mom, I'm okay. Lying down, Amelia said in a faint voice, making me feel even more anxious.
Don't worry about Joseph. We're looking after him, so just try to get some sleep for now.
I'm sorry. Before, she would face me with a sunflower-like bright smile, but now Amelia seemed like a different person, trembling and curling up small.
It's not I'm sorry, it should be thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I continued to gently and slowly stroke Amelia's shoulder. And perhaps due to accumulated exhaustion, she fell asleep in less than 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Joseph, seemingly overflowing with energy, was playing with a toy train with Stephen. Watching them with a smile, I reminded them.
Make sure to tidy up after playing.
Okay. Joseph energetically raised his hand in response.
Good job on responding so well, Joseph. You're a good boy like Amelia.
Laughing, I left Joseph with Stephen and went out to shop for lunch preparations. Deciding to shake off an unfocused anxiety, I thought today we'd have Amelia's favorite omelet rice. When I returned from shopping and it was lunchtime, Amelia had just woken up. Did I sleep a lot?
Yes, you were sound asleep.
What should I do? Her face turned even paler with a frightened expression.
Is something wrong?
Quick, we need to prepare lunch. Ignoring my attempt to stop her, Amelia moved towards the cupboard as if possessed. Her behavior, more suspicious than I had ever seen, made me feel an increasing sense of foreboding. Just then, Stephen and Joseph, tired from playing and hungry, came in.
Grandma, I'm hungry. What's for lunch?
Their waving hands looked so endearing, and I answered warmly.
For lunch, we're having Amelia's favorite omelet rice. Do you like it too, Joseph? Yeah. I love omelet rice,
Joseph said, turning around with his hand raised. At that moment, a loud noise came from the direction of the cupboard.
Amelia?
Rushing over to the cupboard, Amelia, not fully recovered, appeared exhausted, leaning on the table.
Are you okay?
As I took a step closer to support Amelia, something unbelievable happened right before my eyes. A small shadow rushed towards Amelia at an incredible speed, and that shadow, with all its might, kicked Amelia's stomach hard.
What?
Amelia crouched down, and in front of her stood the small shadow.
Joseph?
To my astonishment, the small shadow that kicked Amelia, holding her stomach, was Joseph. Stunned and speechless, I snapped back to reality and scolded Joseph.
Hey, Joseph! What are you doing to Mom?
I quickly went to Amelia's side and whispered to her, Amelia, are you okay? Yes. I'm sorry. For some reason, Amelia kept desperately apologizing. The sight of Joseph, so adorable and obedient before, kicking his mom's stomach was a huge shock to me. Stephen, having witnessed the whole scene, approached with an angry expression. "Joseph, I'm not angry, but explain why you did that." Stephen tried to remain as calm as possible, but it was clear he was struggling to contain his anger, clenching his fists. However, Joseph looked puzzled.
Huh? It's discipline, right?
Discipline? I didn't understand what he meant, but first, I had to help Amelia.
Amelia.
Supporting her shoulders, which couldn't focus her eyes, I looked into her eyes.
Amelia, what's wrong? You seem a bit off.
At those words, Amelia shivered and collapsed onto the floor.
Amelia, are you okay?
Amelia continued to breathe heavily, clutching her stomach. Amelia. I gently touched Amelia's back. Feeling the warmth of my hand, Amelia's breathing slowly calmed down. I decided to keep stroking Amelia's back while keeping an eye on Stephen and the others. Joseph is a good, obedient child, and I felt there must be some reason behind Amelia's behavior.
Joseph, what's going on?
Joseph's face, on the verge of tears, looked up at Stephen, who was now red-faced and angry, unrecognizable from the person who had been playing with him just moments before. But Dad said. At Joseph's softly spoken words, Stephen's brow furrowed. Bursting into tears, Joseph continued. Dad said, it's Mom's discipline.
What do you mean?
When Dad's not here, and Mom messes up, he told me to discipline her. Joseph managed to say between sobs, if I don't discipline her, Mom will get scolded even more.
That's...
Then, Amelia, coughing, managed to squeeze out some words. It's not Joseph's fault. If we don't do this, Joseph gets hit by Christopher. With those words, the bad feeling I had been harboring finally became clear. You've been enduring so much. Imagining Amelia enduring Christopher's treatment all alone without anyone to rely on, tears overflowed. We've been under Christopher's watch. I couldn't say anything until now. Amelia also started to cry big tears.
Amelia, not just you, but Joseph and the baby in your belly. You can't be happy staying with Christopher. What Mom says is right. I can't forgive what he did to our precious daughter.
The tears streaming down Amelia's cheeks didn't stop, and Stephen's words seemed to hit home as she finally voiced her true feelings.
Dad, Mom, I want to cut ties with Christopher.
You did well to say that. Actually, I've been carrying around divorce papers I signed, thinking someday I'd file for divorce. Amelia revealed she had brought them with her this visit, and Stephen immediately said,
Let's call Christopher over right now.
But will he come? Christopher always prioritized his store over listening to Amelia's requests, and she looked doubtful he would comply. Stephen, calling Christopher with a firm tone, said,
Christopher, come to the house right now.
Though I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, from Stephen's manner, Christopher seemed reluctant.
You know what will happen if you don't come, right?
Stephen's forehead veins bulged, and his face turned red, unaccustomed to such actions.
Let's talk more when you get here.
After finally hanging up, Stephen looked displeased.
Are you okay?
I'll just take a little water and rest. After I handed him the water, he drank it down in one go, holding his head. Stephen seemed to have used up a lot of energy in just those few minutes and slumped down on the sofa. Joseph sat beside Amelia, who still couldn't stand up. I clenched my back teeth, pondering what might happen next. Hours later, Christopher arrived, his hair disheveled and dressed carelessly, with a sulky demeanor.
Really? I have work, and now this all of a sudden.
Seeing Christopher's attitude, as if he would attack Amelia the moment we weren't looking, Stephen, who had slightly recovered, spoke up.
What you've done to our precious daughter.
Ah. Christopher replied nonchalantly as if he had grasped something, then glared at Joseph. Without hesitation, Joseph stood in front of Amelia, spreading his small body as wide as he could.
I disciplined Mom instead of Dad, so don't be mad at her anymore.
Christopher slowly started moving towards Joseph and Amelia, prompting Stephen to step in front of the two.
If you move even a step further, I won't hold back.
At Stephen's deep, resonating warning, Christopher shook his head in annoyance, placing his hands on his hips.
Blaming me for everything. What's wrong with disciplining a poorly performing wife?
Christopher glared at Stephen with muddy eyes, showing no sign of remorse.
This is why I hated spoiled princesses. Do you have any idea how much I've hurt my hands trying to educate this worthless wife?
Revealing his abusive behavior towards Amelia without any shame. Furious at Christopher's attitude, I stood next to Stephen.
Amelia is pregnant, you know? What if something happened to the baby? Even if she wasn't pregnant, hitting your wife is the lowest of the low.
The lowest, huh? Amelia, who does chores and parenting half-heartedly, is far worse. Christopher started saying unbelievable things while scratching his head.
Lately, I've been having Joseph do the disciplining because I don't want to waste time on this useless wife. But he can't do it right, just like his mom.
As if discussing tomorrow's weather, he casually mentioned how he would hit Joseph for not disciplining properly, then Amelia even more harshly.
That's unforgivable.
Discovering the unimaginable hardships his beloved daughter had been shouldering, Stephen burst into tears.
Am I really that bad? I was raised this way, and making a fuss over this seems ridiculous.
Apparently, Christopher's parents were aware of and complicit in his actions towards Amelia.
Seriously, give me a break. It's ridiculous that I'm being blamed.
Christopher showed no remorse, instead acting as if he were the victim.
Listen here.
Stephen's anger exploded, and he disappeared into the next room, only to return with several documents.
I don't care about your family, but Amelia and you are getting a divorce.
He then thrust a document at Christopher. Christopher raised his eyebrows slightly upon seeing it. The document Stephen presented was the divorce petition signed by Amelia. Stephen had received the divorce petition from Amelia before Christopher arrived.
I don't mind divorcing Amelia.
Christopher fluidly signed the divorce petition and handed it back to Stephen. Securing the petition with both their signatures, Stephen prepared another document.
Also, I thought Amelia might need support, so I've been financially supporting your parents' store. I want it all back.
As he piled on with another document, Christopher's eyes widened and he collapsed to the ground. The second document, signed by Stephen, related to the financial support, detailing the total amount of support and the possibility of a lump sum repayment as per Stephen's discretion. As an executive of a large company, Stephen had provided significant financial support to Christopher's parents' store, amounting to $100,000. Sitting on the floor, Christopher finally spoke.
I can't give up Joseph, the heir. And there's no way I can repay the funds. As if there's such a convenient story. Don't you have any compassion? I'm the man your precious daughter loved.
Joining forces with Stephen.
After readily agreeing to the divorce with Amelia, it's absurd to talk about warmth and love. Is it okay for me to end up like this?
Huh, Amelia? Desperate, Christopher turned his anger towards Amelia. However, Amelia, having been continuously mistreated but now protected by us, responded with a firm stance.
I don't care what happens to you. As long as I have Joseph and the baby, I'll be happy. So that's how it is.
Having already signed the divorce papers, Christopher seemed to realize he had no recourse and said nothing further, appearing as if his soul had left him. Afterward, Amelia and Christopher's divorce was finalized, and with the loss of Stephen's financial support, Christopher's parents' shop suffered greatly. Faced with financial difficulties, Christopher accumulated debt in an attempt to save the business, but it ultimately failed miserably. Simultaneously, rumors of Christopher's violence towards Amelia and Joseph spread among the neighbors, leading to Christopher being ousted from his family home. Christopher has since been struggling to repay his debts, recognized as a violent man, working tirelessly day and night in a factory located in a remote area, far from his hometown. With Christopher out of the picture, Amelia, having gained custody of Joseph, returned to live with us. On a comfortably sunny autumn day, a healthy cry could be heard from the hospital room.
Amelia, how is it?
Stephen, as always, charged towards Amelia like a wild boar, prompting me to quickly calm him from behind. "Dear, you'll startle the newborn with that kind of energy."
"Oh, sorry."
Stopping in front of Amelia as if slamming on the brakes, Stephen flashed a smile as sweet as melted ice cream.
"She looks just like Amelia, a beautiful girl."
"Thank you." With a serene smile, Amelia looked completely relieved. That smile was indeed the full-bloom sunflower we knew Amelia could be.
Mom.
Joseph, who had been restlessly waiting, approached Amelia happily.
"Joseph, you're a big brother now, say hello."
The baby, just ceased crying, gazed into Joseph's large eyes.
"I'm your big brother."
The baby, grasping Joseph's tentatively extended hand, seemed to smile as if responding.
"How adorable."
Joseph, with his hand firmly grasped in return, immediately showed a brave face befitting a big brother.
"Have you decided on a name for her?"
Stephen asked Amelia with a smile. "I'm thinking of naming her Emma." Amelia's words, spoken cheerfully, resonated deeply with me.
"Thank you, Emma, for being born safely."
My spontaneous words made both Stephen and Amelia nod quietly, their eyes moist. After being discharged, Amelia and her family brought vibrant life to our home. Miraculously, Amelia bore no physical scars, and the newly born Emma was the epitome of health, always smiling. I'm Isabella. I really dislike my parents. What bothers me the most is their obsession with what others think. They use their affectionate behavior towards me to win over people's approval. It seems like that's all that matters to them. So, at home, they were very strict with me. I was constantly nagged about etiquette and how to speak properly, down to the smallest detail. Naturally, I rebelled against that, but they never listened to what I had to say. All that mattered to them was appearing as good people in the eyes of others. They wanted me to play the role of a quiet, well-behaved child. As a young girl, I just convinced myself that it was how things were supposed to be. How long would I have to endure this? Would I have to live with this dissatisfaction forever? I want to get out of this house as soon as possible. Even as a child, I was consumed by this thought. But unexpectedly, a turning point came much sooner. It was when I was in elementary school. My sister Chloe was born. And she was much more pretty than me. It was only a matter of time before our parents' interest shifted from me to her. Eventually, all their love and attention fully turned to her. Thankfully, it allowed me to distance myself from my parents. I can finally be free, I thought, but it turned out they weren't done with me. I realized it during my senior year of high school. It was when I told my parents I wanted to get a job. Of course, I had always thought about leaving home since I was little. Graduating high school was my chance to leave. I had been looking forward to that opportunity for so long. But then, my father said something completely unexpected.
"No way. You're going to college."
I was shocked by his forceful tone. Lately, my parents had been so focused on Chloe. I thought they would easily agree. Maybe he had some expectations for my future. Why do I have to go to college? With a glimmer of hope, I asked him. His response shattered my expectations completely.
You need a decent education to marry well, you know.
So that was it. I finally understood why my parents were so concerned about appearances. They were planning to use my marriage prospects to make their own lives easier.
I want to work,
I protested.
Then, are you going to pay for your moving expenses yourself?
He retorted. His words left me speechless. Given their concern for appearances, my parents had always given me an allowance. But I didn't have enough to afford a move. Moreover, my high school prohibited part-time jobs. There was virtually no way for me to earn the moving expenses myself. He knew it, which is why he said it. As I struggled to respond, he laughed.
We've spent quite a lot on raising you. Maybe you should pay us back for that?
That's...
If you don't like it, go to college,
he concluded. In the end, I couldn't argue back. But if I looked at it differently, they were offering to send me to college for free. As much as they might want to, they couldn't just force marriage or arranged matches on me against my will. So, I decided to obediently go to college and then escape after graduation. After that, I enrolled in a local college. But since my education was just for the sake of appearances, I wasn't allowed to live alone. My father never really considered my academic pursuits at college.
I'll pay your tuition, but in return, you'll have to work part-time and contribute to the household expenses,
he said shortly after I started college. How much should I contribute? I asked.
Let's say $500 a month.
I wanted to focus on my studies now that I was in college. But he would never listen to such a request. Reluctantly, I juggled part-time work with my college lectures. The amount I had to contribute as living expenses was no small sum. With reports and test studies, I could only work a few hours each day. It was a barely manageable amount. But I don't want to waste this opportunity. So, I sacrificed sleep, splitting my time between studying and part-time work. Eventually, I graduated from college and even secured a job at a real estate company. Now I can finally leave home. That's what I thought, but my plan was naive. When I told my father about my job, he said,
"It's fine for you to work, but you can't live alone." "Why not?"
I asked, puzzled.
"What if you end up with some bad guy if you live alone?"
Huh?
"Anyway, stay at home until you get married."
"That's ridiculous."
"Or can you pay back your college tuition right now? If so, I might consider letting you live alone."
"That's impossible. I've been contributing part-time earnings to the household."
"Then, give up on living alone,"
he said with a loud laugh. It seemed he had planned everything. Anticipating that, he had made me contribute to the household expenses. In the end, it was a life dictated by him. Was there no way for me to fight back? With these worries, I started working. But then, a new problem arose. He quit his job shortly after I started working. The reason was back pain. Of course, that was just a facade. He just didn't want to work anymore, and was clearly relying on my income. Still, I couldn't abandon my family. I had even researched ways to cut ties with them, wanting to become a stranger. But there's no way to completely sever ties with family. Parents will always be parents. There's no escaping that. Yet, I hadn't given up on escaping from home. Believing that one day I could live on my own, I diligently saved money. But my father would surely notice my plans. Several years had passed since I started working. One day, when I got home from work, there was a cake on the table. "What's this about?" I asked Chloe, and she replied with a smile. "I got accepted into college." "Really? Congratulations."
"Thank you."
Chloe clapped her hands in joy. I felt happy for her too, but then my father's next words instantly dampened my mood.
"Okay, so you'll be paying her tuition."
"What? I have to pay it?"
"Of course. I can't work because of my injury."
What a thing to say. He looks perfectly healthy to anyone, but arguing with him would be pointless. It's true that he has no income. If I don't pay for Chloe's education, she won't be able to go to college. He knows that and is unabashed about it. That means my plans to live alone are pushed even further away. In his eyes, he gets Chloe's education and keeps me from moving out. Chloe is a good girl. Her presence allowed me, as a young girl, to keep my distance from our parents. I may not be close to Chloe, but I owe her that much. So, I decided to pay for her tuition. Looks like living alone just got further away. That night, I ended up drinking alone late into the night, grumbling about my father. Later, Chloe safely started college. I worked even harder to pay for her tuition. However, such a lifestyle naturally took its toll, and I started to feel worn out. One day, distracted by fatigue, I left my wallet at the entrance and left the house. Arriving at the bus station, I reached for my IC card to board the bus and realized I didn't have my wallet. Shoot. I left my wallet. I quickly remembered leaving it at the entrance. I called my mother, who was at home, and she said, "Chloe took your wallet to you. She had to go to college for something." She did? She said she'd drop it off on her way. I immediately started running back home. Then, a few minutes from the bus stop, near a grocery store, I ran into Chloe. She was carrying a shopping bag from the store. "Chloe, do you have my wallet?" "Here it is." She handed me my wallet. I immediately checked the contents. "You're so suspicious," she teased. "I have the company's card in there. If I lose it, it's trouble for the company." The corporate card and the IC card were both inside. The money was untouched, and I felt relieved. "Thanks, Chloe." I thanked her and hurried back to the bus stop. Thanks to her, I managed to avoid being late. I need to be more careful from now on. That night, I bought a thank you cake for Chloe. She was delighted, and I was grateful. But at that time, I was making a big mistake. Some days later, Aria from accounting came to me at work. "Can I talk to you for a sec, Isabella?" She was a very reliable colleague. She often gave me clothes and cosmetics she didn't need, as I was living frugally. In many ways, I owed her a lot, both professionally and personally. So, I thought she wanted to talk about something personal, but it turned out to be a bit different, and Aria took me to a private place. "What's going on, Aria?" "Listen. I wanted to ask you, have you ever used the company card for personal reasons?" The company card she referred to was the corporate card. Designed for managing expenses in one place, the company had issued these cards to employees. Of course, as a salesperson, I also had a company-issued card. However, the charges were to be billed to the corporate account. So, using the card for personal reasons would be immediately noticeable. I think I've only used it during work hours," I replied, feeling anxious. I didn't recall doing anything wrong, but I couldn't completely rule out the possibility of it being used without my knowledge. As I was pondering, she said, "Actually, your card was used at a grocery store. It looks like it was for buying water. Do you remember?" Grocery store, water. I thought hard about it. Then, I remembered the day I forgot my wallet. For a brief moment that day, Chloe had my wallet. I normally never let anyone else handle my wallet, especially at work. Therefore, if someone else used the card, it had to have been Chloe on that day. "Well, do you know the date it was used?" I didn't want to suspect Chloe. I asked Aria, hoping to prove it wasn't her. If the card was used on a different day, then she wouldn't be the culprit. I must have been absent-minded and accidentally used the company card. That's what I wanted to believe, but reality was harsh. The card had been used on the very day I forgot my wallet. "Is there anything you can recall?" Aria asked. On impulse, I blurted out, "Oh, I might have mistaken it for my IC card." "Really?" "I sometimes buy water before work." "I see. I'm really sorry about that." I paid the amount that had been charged right there. I made excuses in a panic, but Aria comforted me, saying, "Don't worry, I've made the same mistake before." I was worried it might happen again. Driven by anxiety, I asked Aria for a favor right then and there. "Are you sure? It'll be extra work for you, Isabella." "Yes. I don't want to repeat the same mistake." "Okay, I'll take care of it." "Thank you so much." Thus, I managed to avoid turning it into a big issue. But I knew there wouldn't be a second chance. If something similar happened again, it would surely be a major problem. That's why I took the initiative. That incident was a significant turning point for me. I had always thought Chloe was a good girl, But she was a child doted on by our father. She never rebelled against him. If she's aware of everything, maybe she's just pretending to be good, not just outside the house, but in front of me as well. At that moment, I found her smile strangely frightening. My parents were trying to use me for their own benefit. So, I was already cautious of them, especially my father. But now, I had to be wary of Chloe too. What should I do? The thought of living with my parents and Chloe became scary. I had always wanted to leave, but now more than ever. After much thought, I confided in my boyfriend, Timothy. Why don't we get married then? He said casually. I was at a loss for words. He smiled. If we're married, you can leave your house. I'm a civil servant, so they probably won't object. That's true. He and I were classmates in college. We'd been dating for over 5 years, and I had been thinking it might be time. But I had my family to consider. I couldn't easily say yes to marriage. However, I had told him about my family's problems. He had listened and advised me on various things. Despite all that, he was still willing to marry me. Please, I'd appreciate it. So, I decided to get married. But it wasn't just happiness filling me up. There were too many problems, especially with my father. It wasn't certain that he would agree to the marriage. I'll have to persuade him carefully. I decided to take my time convincing him. But as I hesitated to bring up the topic of marriage at home, time just passed by. Half a year went by like that. I need to say something soon, I thought to myself. Then, unexpectedly, my father and I got into an argument.
Enough. I've told you many times to marry the person I introduced. That's impossible. I'm seeing someone. What? Who is the guy? He's a civil servant. A good person.
He fell silent at my words and seemed to be thinking. I took the chance to say,
he's willing to give a generous dowry. That should satisfy you, right?
He looked hesitant. That could work. I decided to push through.
How much should the dowry be? $30,000.
I thought that was a lot. But when I mentioned it to Timothy, he agreed to provide it. Thus, with his help, I was able to leave my home. Once the decision was made, everything else went smoothly. I started preparing to move right away. Then, on a certain Sunday, I arranged for the movers to come. During the move, Chloe approached me.
Just keep your promise to pay for my tuition, okay?
That's fine, but can I ask you something? You've used my card without permission, haven't you?
Oh, you found out, huh?
She said, without any sign of remorse. I had tried several times to confront her about the truth, but never got the chance. I gathered my courage to ask, but it seemed like no big deal to her. Using someone else's card is a crime. Do you understand that?
It's fine, we're family, aren't we?
She replied, showing no guilt. I was infuriated. I'll deposit the tuition money into the designated account. But that's it. Consider it severance. Huh? Once I leave this house, we're strangers. Do whatever you want. She walked off with a scoff. Later that evening, when the moving was done, I went to the living room where my father was waiting. Where's the money? It's always about money with you. Here it is.
I've always dreamed of profiting from marrying you off to someone well off since you were born.
Well, this should be enough. I've contributed plenty to this house already.
Yeah, now it's all up to Chloe's future spouse.
He smirked, his comment dripping with sarcasm. He might keep coming back to ask for more money. That thought makes me angry. But when that time comes, I'll just have to turn him away. Then we had our last meal as a family. Chloe wasn't there, though. According to my mother, she was out with friends. Better not to see her. After the meal, I gathered my belongings and decided to leave the house. But as I was leaving, I ran into Chloe.
Oh? Still here, Isabella? Ah, right, here, I'm returning this.
Without a word, she handed something over. I looked down and saw it was the company card. I quickly checked my wallet.
Only realizing now? I took it when I was in your room.
You're so clueless. I clenched my teeth. Clearly, she had used it without permission. That's when it hit me. Chloe brazenly admitted.
I used your card for drinks and meals for about 100 people, so check it up.
Then, without being asked, she started telling me all about it. She talked about a reunion she had and going to an all-you-can-eat, one thing after another. She even mentioned choosing an expensive restaurant, thinking about the card's limit. That really made me angry. So, I retorted, "Who are you, exactly?"
What? You were serious about us being strangers once you left home? But what about the tuition fee?
She kept bothering me about it.
The bank card for the tuition fees has been given to Dad,
I said, and quickly walked away. Afterwards, I joined Timothy and started our new married life. Nothing much changed, though. I continued working, and the only real change was our home. But that was the biggest change for me. I was filled with a sense of freedom I had never felt before. I hoped this happiness would last a long time while enjoying life with him. About half a year went by. One day at work, Chloe showed up.
"You're here! Come out!"
She caused a scene at the company reception. Hearing it, I rushed to the reception. "Chloe."
"There you are! What do you think you're doing, you liar?"
She yelled the moment she saw me. She started shouting at me, showing me her bank card.
"I got a call saying the tuition couldn't be withdrawn, and I was embarrassed, you know."
"What are you talking about?" "I made sure to deposit it."
"Huh? But it clearly hasn't been withdrawn."
"Don't you even know how to check your bank card? Are you really a university student?"
"Of course I am, 4th year at a national university. I've even secured a job."
She yelled. Sighing, I explained, "I deposited this year's $5,000 tuition fee. Here's the deposit record, see?"
"That's exactly it. That amount was withdrawn from the card. You must have done it."
"It was you who withdrew it, right?"
"I don't even have a card." "So it was you."
"But I heard you paid for foods for 100 people with it, didn't I?"
"Foods? What foods?"
"Don't you remember paying for an all-you-can-eat for 100 people with the card?" As I questioned her, her face turned pale. In a panic, she started making excuses.
I used your company card, but it's a corporate card, so."
Clearly, she didn't understand. So, I explained to her carefully. A corporate card withdraws from the corporate account. That's correct knowledge.
"So, the card I used was—"
But once, someone used my card without permission. So, I had the withdrawals changed to my personal account.
"Personal account?"
What I had was indeed a corporate card. That was when I realized. The withdrawals were being made from my personal account, not the corporate account. That setup, while involving more paperwork for expense claims, allowed for private use of the card. Essentially, it eliminated the need to carry multiple cards. Plus, if someone else used it, the company wouldn't suffer any damage. Meaning, when she paid for the drinks, it was already set to withdraw from my personal account. So, the amount for the drinks is gone. It's your responsibility since you used it.
"What about the university tuition?"
I paid what was asked of me. You'll have to figure out the rest. With that, she began to make even more noise. Eventually, the police arrived and restrained her.
"No! That's not me."
"What do you mean? You admitted to using my card."
"That was—"
"I clearly told you. Using someone's card without permission is a crime."
"But—"
"Think about what you've done." In the end, she was taken to the police station for questioning. However, I didn't file a complaint. I didn't see the need, especially since someone had uploaded her outburst at my company on social media. Unsurprisingly, it quickly drew a wave of criticism. She ended up being expelled from her university. After that, my parents, who concerned about appearances, moved to the countryside with her. It seemed they thought they could escape the scandal by leaving town. Their plan was to find a marriage partner for Chloe there and then extort money from him. But given their bad characters, it was unlikely to work. I heard they quickly got into trouble with Chloe's new partner.
"Isabella! We're being sued for damages! Help us!"
My father contacted me about a month after I moved. Causing trouble within just a month, they would likely repeat the same mistakes.
"I'm sorry, but if you come to our house, I'll file a complaint about the previous incident."
Be prepared for that. After I said that, he stopped contacting me. But with no money and no job, I couldn't help but worry. So, I had a private investigator secretly check on them, and they turned out to be working together at a logistics warehouse. Apparently, it was the company of the person Chloe had clashed with. They must have been told to work off the debt if they couldn't pay it. Hearing they were working long hours in a gloomy warehouse, I felt a bit relieved. They should be able to pay off the damages and earn their living expenses. I decided to let them fend for themselves and keep working. Meanwhile, Timothy and I continued our happy married life. My job was going well, and my sales performance was steadily improving. With no family around, money was accumulating. All that good fortune made me a little apprehensive about the future. But for now, I want to fully enjoy this happiness I've finally attained with Timothy.